Welcome to Homeschooling for Spirituality. The Flow is a delightful mix of insight, divine inspiration, and humor, where wisdom meets earthiness to help your ongoing spiritual growth and transformation. Follow the flow of enlightenment and explore everything spiritual through the deepest self-inquiry, as student Lisa Berry asks Master Spiritual Teacher G.P. Walsh the kinds of questions you would ask an elder, a wise man, or a sage, and receive direct, simple, comprehensive, and deeply human lessons and teachings. From transcending the experience of separation, releasing old conditioned patterns and wounds, and alleviating suffering, to demystifying esoteric practices and revealing one's true purpose and innate freedom. Welcome to the Flow of Enlightenment. Transformation is all there is.
All right, GP, it's the big day, training day. Training for the awakening, your awakening, like the listener's awakening. And GP, wow, you've been in you're always in teacher mode, but we're really calling you to the podium to teach today, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, for all the listeners, I would love to just share, this is what you're in for. This one, you know what, it came as such a surprise as GP and I have our little brainstorming conversations and we see what shows up. And when this one came up, wow, I thought, gosh, I don't think we're going to be able to cover it all. So it should be a course, and maybe it will be with you. You never know, GP. But, but some of the questions that came up around this, like, oh gosh, there's so many. So I'm thinking of them as I'm thinking of them. So what is an awakening? Have I already had one and I don't know it? What to do after an awakening? Like, people, we need to know these things. So do self techniques like EFT, and which you're doing a 10 days of tapping right now, we'll talk about, but do self techniques like EFT aid in awakening or afterwards, like to bring one on, inspire one, I guess. Is it totally an accident, or can I somehow make an awakening happening? We're jumping into that one. Is it scary? And in the East, people are prepared for it. They train for it in a way. And how do they do that, and why don't we? And if I awaken, will I fall back asleep? And I am awake, I think. Now what? So GP, whoa, there's a lot around awakening. I've never thought of it. So may I start with your awakening, your own? Could you let's just start there. Did you train for your awakening, or did it just happen and all that good stuff?
No. Oh God, no. Yeah. I trained in asleepness.
That's
yes,
funny.
I trained for exactly the opposite, but in a sense you could say life was training me, because it was just 19 years of hell, and suffering, and when you suffer, you can't help but look for a solution to it. You just can't help it, right? It's the nature of the game. We seek happiness, and when we're feeling, whether it be just a minor, a quiet under the surface discontent, which is actually what the word suffering in Sanskrit means, dukkha. When Buddha referred to suffering, that's what he was talking about. Just that underlying discontent that's always there. Or if it's an intense suffering, right? Just enormous emotional pain. And I was in the category of the latter for pretty much the first 19 years of my life. And so there was, my soul was very naturally trying to find a place of relief. Right? And so while I had no training of it, and I was invested in all sorts of things that were never going to deliver it, like drugs and trying to become a rock star, and investing my identity in all sorts of things that would never actually lead to it. I didn't really realize at the time that in all of those instances I was simply searching for a sense of happiness, a sense of my worth, a sense of value, a sense of a connection to life. And that's what I found. And it came to me as it's not have enough time to go into the whole story, but at 19 years old, really at the end of my rope, I had this extraordinary experience, and suddenly I was confronted with the thing that I have been explaining to people ever since, and that is, there is at the heart of you an innate, what I call original innocence, which has never been touched by any of this. And that the whole problem of human existence is mistaking the conditioning of the nervous system for yourself. And when you begin to glimpse that you are not what you think you are, the fact that you've glimpsed it is already awakening. Because when you're asleep, you don't even glimpse it. It never even presents itself. All you have to even do is become aware of the fact that no matter what you do, there's a discontent there. And that's an awakening. Because otherwise you're just going off on whatever the latest distraction is, or the latest tool is, or the latest thing that somebody's selling as to how to make your life better. You're just constantly in that game. But for many people, there comes a point where it's like, okay, well, yet another book, yet another seminar, yet another class, right? I get a high, and then I'm back here again, right? Yes. And you become aware of Shiva's wheel, of this loop that keeps going. I call it the self-help treadmill.
Yep.
Right? And the retreat crash, right? I'm sitting on top of the world, and the next thing I know, I'm back down here again. And that nothing of substance has changed. That realization is so powerful. Now, that contradicts, the Hollywood version of the awakening, right? Everybody,
it sure does.
Rainbows and dolphins.
Bliss.
And it's just this, it's perpetual bliss, and now I'm a Buddha. Because people don't realize that when Buddha sat down to meditate, he'd finally let the self-immolation and austerity behind. But he probably weighed about 50 pounds. He looked like he was death warmed over. So when he was sitting there, he was not the beautiful picture of what he sees. This was a guy completely beat to snot.
Yeah.
And he just said, I'm not getting up until I have the answer to suffering. And so he simply became unmovable in his quest. He was no longer distracted by any religious ideas, by any particular practice. He tried the practices, they didn't work, including literally starving, torturing the body to the point where he might be able to transcend the body. And he went beyond all of those techniques, right? Just like we need to do now, only we've got 10 million more than he had available to him.
Yeah.
We got to go beyond those and say, I'm just not moving from here until I find the answer. And it's in me. That's why he was not moving. He was sitting under that tree. He wasn't going looking for yet another course or a seminar. He wasn't even looking to be the Buddha. He was looking inside himself to discover the answer to suffering. And it is the awakening that drives you to the practice, the teacher.
Yes.
It's all the awakening, right? The awakening is all that's happening. Every event in your life.
It's like a chicken and the egg.
In your
it's
life,
the awakening
everything that
comes
goes
first.
wrong. Yes, it's always first.
Oh, I love that.
So if you're listening to this show and listening to me, it's already happened.
Yes.
But if we have the Hollywood version of it, and we think somehow we're supposed to now be walking on water and talking to interdimensional beings, we're going to figure we don't got it.
Yes. Yeah,
But
the awakening comes
do.
before the seeking.
Yes. It creates the seeker. Prior to that, you're just in the delusion. But in that something shifts. All of a sudden you're reading spiritual books. Why?
Yes, yeah.
Something inside you has woken up.
Yeah. It was actually that story that you're talking about of Buddha and the starving himself. And I remember not even one grain of rice that actually scared me from wanting an awakening. I was like, I don't want to suffer. Like, that sounds awful. And so
well, it is.
I felt so painful. Yeah. And a lot of people think that that's actually what we must do to get there. They think that Buddha was successful. I'm wondering, sorry, because I think this is what I thought, that was part of his success. But it wasn't. It was...
No, it wasn't.
He didn't... If he didn't do that, he would still be Buddha. If he did, well, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. Is it necessary to go through painful techniques?
He had, for himself, he had to exhaust all the ways he thought would work. And he did. And then he realized they didn't. So after that, he didn't teach austerity. It wasn't part of his Buddhist practice. It was a completely different kind of practice that emerged. One of deep introspection and meditation. One of letting go of attachments, right? Not torturing yourself, but finding the middle way. Finding the balance in all things. Finding the flow of life and being in that flow of life. That is where you will find that contentment. And then the deep practice of meditation, which the whole point of it is to go beyond your assumptions, go beyond everything you think you are, until you go beyond thinking itself to the pure reality of being. That's the Buddhist path. And so it has not, all of those practices he abandoned. Right?
Yes, that's important
now,
to know
for
that.
him, his personal experience, he needed to do that in order to be convinced. Right?
Yes.
He could have been convinced without that.
And we're stepping stones.
But for him, that was his particular, Siddhartha's path.
Yes.
And
each one of us had that.
You'll have a very different Buddha story. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're living your Buddha story now. Right?
Yes. And you actually, that answered one of them, is that have I already had one and don't know it? I think you just answered that. Everybody listening right now, if you think you didn't have one, have not yet had one, well, there you go. You now know that you have, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. So one of the questions I do like...
in any walk of life who's ever sensed that discontent, even if it's only been for a split second and they ran away from it, that moment of feeling the discontent is the awakening.
Ooh, feeling the discontent is the awakening. Whoa!
Because if you don't become aware of it, you're in the dream. You're so completely lost in the distractions and the illusion that you don't even feel it. Right. It's buried underneath. But for everybody, at some point, just something happens where it's right there and we can't avoid feeling it. Now you're truly present. You're conscious with what's actually here. You may immediately, 3 seconds later, completely cover the whole thing up and be running off to to surf the internet or something. But in that, for those 3 seconds, you were there. You were awake.
So when we do research it, go to the internet to look things up, are we ruining it? Are we stopping it from? Are we stopping ourselves from being awake when we try to catch it and grab it?
Depends on where you are on the path. Because it's very easy to get into the habit of collecting spiritual knowledge, and then a pride of spiritual knowledge can emerge, and then I can become a pundit and not a sage. It's living it. Yes, there's a certain need for information, and so you can't just deny everything, right? It's a flow. Buddha gave 45,000 sutras, right? So he wasn't adverse to teaching. But he always tempered it. He tempered it with meditation, right? You have to take the teaching, take it in, and become the teaching. Right? You can't remain in the head. It has to merge into your life. So you become the teaching. Somebody asked Mooji one time, because he was a student of Papaji, he said, what was Papaji's highest teaching? And Mooji said, I'm his highest teaching. Oh. He said it with no arrogance. He was pointing to the fact that it was a living thing. So you hear an idea, some spiritual idea about meditation or something like that, then you practice it. You don't learn how to play the piano by reading books about piano. You sit your ass down and you play. And you play
right,
badly.
yes. So can we practice
but you
awakening?
are playing.
Right, yes.
Well, yeah, you are. You are trying to remove, right? Because the awakening is there, right? There's an innate sense in all of us that we're ignoring, right? Because we don't want to feel the discontent. We don't want to directly feel that sense of suffering, right? Mm-hmm. But of course we have to feel it long enough to go through it. Otherwise we're avoiding it. We're in the world of distraction and illusion, right? You have to come out of that world of illusion, and there's all sorts of demons and things that are going to want to tell you how horrible it is. You have to stay in the illusions. It's horrible there. It's going to feel terrible. And of course you feel this little discontent. You go, oh my God, the devil's right. I don't want to go there, right? And that's the practice. That's the practice of actually sitting present, being present with what's here. And what's happening isn't that you are invoking the awakening. You're clearing everything that's been obscuring it, because it's been there the whole time.
Oh, you're allowing the awakening. Oh my gosh. So on that note, yes, because I know the commercial is going to sneak up, that is a big one. So we are like, I love that we've called it training for the awakening, but the training is the practice of allowing the awakening. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we're already getting to some good stuff. All right, everybody, please come on back after the commercial break here to the Flow of Enlightenment here with GP Walsh and Lisa Berry.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
I'm so not good enough. Fail. They'll judge me. I'm afraid others it's already been done.
Who are you not to fully express who you are, to be your warrior of light and do business from your fierce, aligned energy? I'm Rosalind Fung, host of Activate Your Soulgasmic Business here on OMTimes Radio. Let's get your business turned on to the next level. I invite you to hop on a business soul alignment discovery call with me at rosalindfung.com and let's monetize in your soul mission. Go to ROSALYN F as in fun, UNG.com.
I am Fidel Nshambo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America, and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Oh, welcome back, everyone. And I have to just piggyback on that commercial because he said something very significant there, GP, that, you know, we have this problematic life and we pick up and we move or we quit a job or we stop something and then boom, it's going to be better. But no, you have different problems. When it comes to an awakening, is there, like we talked about, you know, having to be bliss and all this kind of stuff, but can an awakening actually put us in, I don't want to say put us into more crisis or suffering, but can sometimes after an awakening it really mess our lives up?
No. what happens is you discover exactly how messed up they already are.
Okay.
And that realization feels as if, oh, my life is falling apart. No, dear, it was never together in the first place. Awakening means you're becoming aware of what's actually going on.
Okay.
That's the difference, right? From the point of view of my old way of being, it seems like everything is falling apart. It feels like it can, right? Because what you are doing is courageously going to the places that you have simply not wanted to look at. You've not wanted to see them, and now they're there. You've turned the light on in the room that you haven't been in 20 years, and it stinks. It's dusty, right? It's nasty. There's rats running around, right? It's like, oh dear.
There's some work to be done in here.
And you have a choice. You have a choice. What we normally do is we just shut the door and we go off and surf the internet. We get on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
But there's a certain point in the awakening where the moral conviction of it takes over enough that you actually open the door all the way and walk in. Even while the demons are standing outside, don't go in there. No, you're going to regret it. It's going to be terrible. Look at all the horrible things. Why bother? It feels good out here. The list is endless for distractions. No. You need a new car. That's what you need. You don't need this. Right? But that in hidden amongst all of that dirt and dust and rats is a treasure of unimaginable proportions.
No. That sounds beautiful.
What you actually have been seeking all your life is in there.
If that, okay, hold on a second. This is fun. I imagine this room is awesome. What a great analogy to work with. So first of all, thank you for showing that room. I think I have a few of those actual rooms, and you're right. And then you find these treasures like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen this forever. But what's coming to mind, I'm going to use a person, like a friend of mine, who would, get on the phone. I need to talk about something, and we get on the phone, and she's like, you know what? I can't even. Let's not even talk about it. Let's just talk about something else. And it sounds so meaning, like that doesn't sound big, right? That's meaningless. Oh, whatever. You didn't want to talk about it. But then if you create a habit, and that's your actual way of living, to stay asleep. And I'm not saying you have to, talk about it every time, but eventually, and I know with this particular friend, she's, 80 pounds overweight. She's miserable. She's unhappy. And what happened is the world around her made her have to not talk about it or deal with it, but it dealt things for her. So, yes. And I think a lot of listeners might connect with that one. In saying that, would you consider that a sleep? Like when you are consciously denying or suppressing, or is that the opposite of can we prevent an awakening?
Well, we can postpone it, right? Okay. There's a certain amount of free moral agency that everyone has, right? And it's like anything, you either respond or you don't, right? Yes. And what happens is that God doubles down and the suffering increases.
Yes.
Right? Because you keep trying to avoid the suffering instead of diving into it to find its cause. The suffering's just going to increase, because that's the purpose of life, is to wake you up. The purpose of life is not for you to get all the things you want. Christ didn't come here so you could be rich. Right? He died on the cross so you could make $1 million. What, are you kidding me? And a lot of people think that. It was like the prosperity gospel and all of that, and the whole ideal of the West, and particularly the United States, is that material prosperity is the sign of God's grace. And what a delusion!
Yes, God has graced us. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, God's graced
really
you with deprivation and suffering. Old
God,
age and death. Those are the gifts.
You're not going to be popular here, GP. Come on.
That's why change now.
Yes.
It's not easy to market the crucifixion.
No, agreed there. I love that you turn something around. We're walking around every day thinking and asking, what's my purpose? I need to find my purpose, and I got to figure out my purpose, and there's business around this. But you actually just said the purpose of life is to wake you up. The purpose of life. I think that's a great question that we should all ask ourselves, is like, would we come up with a different answer? Like, is that really the purpose of life? Is to wake us up?
Yes, it is. The purpose of the river is to become the ocean. It can take quite a circuitous route to get there, rocks and stagnant places and the like, but its ultimate destiny is always the same. That's where the flow heads, and there's no denying it. The flow of your life is headed there. It is your destiny. You might as well accept it and ride the wave, because you're going to go there one way or the other. And if you resist, it'll just get more troublesome.
Right. That makes so much sense.
That's good news, by the way.
Yes. I actually like the riding the wave part. That sounds nice. Like a little leaf, floating down. A little ant on the leaf, on the water, flowing down. It's just riding along.
Yes. Well, when somebody embraces the spiritual path, when they embrace the awakening and that this is where they're headed, they enter the spiritual path. And there's a variety of different practices and the like. But at that point, they're trying to ride the wave. They stop fighting it. They stop looking for an end to suffering in just more temporary material solutions and distractions. And the attention is focusing more on where it really lies. And Steve Jourdain put it beautifully. I put it in the newsletter. When you're doing that, you're headed in the right direction. You're knocking on the right door, right? But he points out, he says, I can show you where the door is, and I can show you how to knock. But there's no causal connection between you knocking and it opening. But if you're standing there knocking, you're in the very best place you can be to see it when it does.
Oh, yes.
You can't force the awakening, the full awakening of Buddha consciousness to happen, because it's not an event that gets caused. It's not the result of a process. It's not like some self-help thing. I do steps X, Y, and Z, and then I get this result. If it was, it would be impermanent and finite like everything else. It is a realization of what is now and has always been, and therefore isn't the result of any kind of any kind of process, which is why people will say awakening is an accident. And then I say, yes, but I can make you more accident prone.
Oh, I love that. And I was actually just going to ask that, because when you're saying awakening isn't a process, it's not do this technique, do that technique and everything, but we also know that in the East, they help you prepare for it, which is, I'm going to call that accident prone. And
yes.
So there's a difference. Preparing is different than processing. Yes, that's what I want to say. And what are the ways that in the East, right from before birth, they are being prepared and, yes, what are the words that I'm looking for? Because it's so different in the East. They just look at awakening. Do they even call it an awakening, or is it just they don't need a name for it because it's just always happening?
No, they do, because they need to wake up as well, but they don't have the same emphasis on materialism that we do. Right? They regard the spiritual teacher with the highest level of honor. They have a culture that understands this sort of stuff, that mystical experiences are to be embraced. They're not a sign of madness or craziness or anything like that. They're to be embraced. And if some child starts exuding certain kinds of qualities, well, they take them to the guru. They don't say no. They don't try to basically enculture them into something else. And so there's a context in which somebody experiencing an awakening can understand what happened to them. When it happened to me, I was 19, living in a small town in Illinois, that had no kind of context whatsoever. It's just, your basic white Christian people, right? I had no idea what had happened. I had no context. I had no way to explain it. Right. When I started looking, I found some things about metaphysics and the like. I'd never heard of Zen. I'd never heard of the word yoga.
Yeah.
I had no way. I had no place to put it. Right. And so at first, I finally discovered the whole new thought thing. Right. And so that became a context, but that actually limited it. Eventually I saw that was limiting it, right? That it gave me a language, it gave me a way to begin to process it, but then eventually became an impediment to it, right? So I moved on to other things. And it's the same thing there, right? They have a much more direct path. But when you're talking about the preparation, you're talking about training yourself to not put so much emphasis on materiality, to see how our attachment to things creates suffering. And if we can see that, we very naturally begin to shift the way we are in the world. And so our hearts become more open, our minds become more flexible, we become more compassionate, more gentle, and those that we become less arrogant and more humble. And that is a state of mind where the clouds have gotten so thin that the sun can get through. Mm-hmm. The dense materialist, right, with lust for power and greed, there's not much room for the light to get through. Yeah. In order for the light to get through, something's going to have to shatter that. And that's what it feels like when you're stuck in that. And that is the character of the individual that we develop in the West, right? Not spiritual at all. And so when it's not spiritual, you replace it with very rule-oriented religions like we have, right? Which ends up in the extreme of fundamentalist Christianity, which bears no relation to the teachings of Christ, by the way.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting you mentioned about material, and of course we think, first of all, money, cars, house, mansion, da 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 da. And then when you were describing what happens as we soften and become a little bit more humble, it's funny because in there I recognize that one of my quote unquote material attachments actually were not quite material. In fact, it was time, and I would micromanage the clock. That was my arrogance, I can control I can schedule everything and I'm perfect, and my ego was that was me. Oh yeah. and I remember upon that I went to Belize, or to San Pedro, little island, and they have no concept of time. Everything is really laid back and slow. And I thought I was going to have an anxiety attack when I first got there. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I felt powerless. And then I surrendered. I want to say surrendered to it. But what happened, just like when you said about the thin veil allowing the sunshine to come through, I felt suddenly, it took a couple days, to be honest with you. I think by the fourth or fifth day, I was like, there's a space in my stomach. Like there's this breathing space. There's this space. What's this? And it was, that belief of material attachment to the clock, the time, the activity, where energy was being spent. And I feel like I had an I must have had an awakening. And then, wait, here's my question. That's good. Did I have, hang on here, how would that work? Where was the awakening? When was the awakening, if I were to go back on that one?
The awakening happened when you were in Belize and you were freaking out because they had such a different version of time. But something inside of you questioned your version of time rather than just trying to force them into conforming to it.
Well, because I also felt it's all of them against me and I'm going to lose. No, but...
That's right. And you want to lose that battle. You don't want to win that battle.
Right.
But you think you do. But if in that moment, it just stays in the conflict, right? And you get angry about it, and why aren't you on time, and things like that. Yes. Then no awakening has occurred. But if even the tiny little doubt that maybe their way is better, because they're way happier.
Yes.
Right?
They so were. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. you notice that and you go, oh, that's the awakening.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope somebody else has a story like that they just connected with, because that really was an awakening, life-changing moment. And we still have a few moments before the commercial break, but I want to take the time to invite them to something that you're doing. But just a friendly reminder and a heads up for you, GP. One thing that I learned this morning from watching day 1 of tapping was, I want to talk about it, is conflict, because you just brought that up. And it's the conflict. Sorry, I can't word it now. But the suffering is when you are experiencing conflict and you can't feel safe. So if somebody right now is listening and they're thinking, wait a second, I've got some conflict going on in my life. I also want to take this opportunity to invite them, because we are on day 2. Day 2 happened. You can still catch the replay.
Yeah.
10 days of tapping. And GP, you are doing this for our lovely group, GP Walsh Spiritual Facebook group. It's a private group. You can... you know what? The website's live, so pop on over there, get onto the list, and then ask us, where can I find the group? We can get you there, and you can catch up, and you can continue the next 8 days of tapping with you, GP, and you're covering some big ones, like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, the big ones.
Yes. I don't trust myself, I'm not lovable, I'm not valuable. All of these things that are underlying the surface that we don't want to confront because we believe them to be true.
That room that we don't want to go into the room.
That's the room we don't want to go into, yes.
Great. So GP is escorting you into that room and helping. Well, yeah. You're actually just helping us to know how we can go into that room and feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, guys.
That's the whole point.
Yes. Yes. So we'll sneak away to commercial. When we come back, we are definitely going to be talking about that and conflict. So conflict resolution on its way.
They should send me to the UN.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
All right, well, welcome back to the Flow of Enlightenment. You are here with GP Walsh and myself, Lisa Berry. And I will first, for any callers. So we were talking a little bit there about tapping and getting over some of the biggies of, I'm not worthy enough, lovable, I don't trust myself. And if you kind of was like, oh, some of those are I'm perking up on those ones because it's me, then call in and ask a question because GP is here to help you through that. And the number to call in is 202-570-7057. So 202-570-7057. 7057. You'll be calling into the station and asking live. And GP, if I may, before I go into that whole conflict thing, because that was a big thing for me this morning with the tapping, day 2 was today. Did some new, sorry, I shouldn't say new. Which pillar did you kind of work around?
Today the focus was on I don't trust myself, and I'm not valuable.
Valuable. Ooh.
Yeah, value.
How does that show up for people as a life example? What would that?
You won't show up.
I don't trust myself. I won't show up.
You won't show up. You'll always look for the places that are the same and don't challenge that. You'll find yourself afraid in situations, and not allow yourself to actually experience yourself in that. You will. What happens is that if that emotional or energetic assumption gets put into place, that I'm not enough, as a general truth, right? As a permanent characteristic rather than a situational thing, because we all show up in situations where we're not enough. In this situation, I'm not. But what happens when you're a child, that feeling seems as if it's permanent, right? Yes. And so it's not, in this moment, I didn't have what it takes in this moment. It's, I never have what it takes. That's what happens. And then the nervous system kind of builds behaviors around, puts that idea, that belief into the room that you don't want to face, and then creates a bunch of behaviors to not go to that room. I don't even want to go to that room to challenge that idea. I can't challenge the idea. It's the truth. And as a result, events in your life when you really aren't enough will be taken as evidence that it's a universal, that is a general truth about you. It's an existential truth and not just conditional. And those moments when you do and you are will simply be ignored. There'll be a fluke, or you were being a phony. You were pretending to be enough. You really weren't enough. Even though you were, and you were enough, it gets interpreted from the point of view of that assumption, which will govern all of your perceptions. And it really does work like that, and everybody can just kind of check in with their own life and look and see how that has actually been the case, how particular circumstances have been interpreted on an energetic and emotional level. And the result, of course, will be extremely reluctant to go into any situation where we think we're not going to be enough because we're afraid of the humiliation. We're basically afraid of dying.
Yes. Wow, that was a huge spiral staircase. Whoa. And I can really see that. And to the flip side too, or everybody's could react, or their behaviors might be different, whereas as opposed to not showing up, they might actually lash out, blame others, or pick a fight, or do these things. And
absolutely. Yeah. All of those are simply the methods the nervous system uses to avoid going in that room.
Yes, the room avoid. So is it, if anybody listening right now, and could each one of us look at our lives and say, here's a situation where I really dislike myself when I behave this way. Something we don't like about ourselves. Let's just put this in really easy language. You know, like I get all hyper and hasty because I struggle with the clock. And I don't like that about myself. So is that something that I might say, I need to have an awakening so that I'm comfortable with it? Or is this something that I could tap on? Like,
yeah, well, you know, the way I do tapping, my whole point of tapping is it's part of a bigger package, right? It's part of what I call inner reconciliation. And because I said conflict being the cause of suffering, obviously the end of conflict is the end of suffering. And where's the conflict, right? Right? So there's this part of you that's there and you don't like it. And I ask, well, why? Why don't you like it, right? And you'll have a bunch of reasons why you don't like it. Now, you're in a conflict with it, right? You've tried every possible way to get rid of it that you possibly could, right? And you can't. There's this energetic position inside, right? Now, it doesn't have the consciousness that you do, right? So it is not capable of dropping its position.
Yes.
You are. Only you can end the conflict, right? Somebody's got to drop out of the conflict. They can't.
Right.
That feeling inside of you cannot change. The nervous system, the protective mechanism will never stop trying to protect you. You can't make it stop. So what has to happen? You have to stop fighting it. It's all you. You're creating the conflict. It doesn't have a conflict with what it's doing. Your nervous system doesn't have a conflict with anything it's doing. Your stomach isn't arguing about having to digest food yet again.
Right. Right.
Oh God, not again. Tofu salad again. I mean, right? It's just doing it's its nature to do. If something unpleasant goes in there, it grumbles a little bit, makes a little extra gas, or pushes it back out. Right? It just does that, and it has no conflict with that. No problem whatsoever. So all the conflict comes from my own self-rejection. It means I reject what I'm actually experiencing in favor of what I think I want to be experiencing. And of course that puts us completely out of sync and in total conflict with the present moment. It puts you out of conflict with yourself, and then you think, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. That's the point. Right? Yeah. Except that you're not accepting yourself as you actually are. And of course that's the big one. Right? Yes. We're only willing to accept ourselves if we appear the way we think we're supposed to be. All right, so if I'm hopelessly handsome and brilliantly intelligent, I have all sorts of money and the like, and perfect weight, I've got my perfect body, then I will be acceptable.
That's right.
So all of these criteria, right?
Yeah.
And until that happens, which of course it never can, I will be in conflict with what I'm experiencing in this moment.
Yes.
So how do you drop the conflict? Well, you have to do it, right? Yeah. So the first thing you do is you turn around and you start walking towards the very thing you're trying to conquer.
Right.
With a white flag.
Mm-hmm. Then the white flag's the important part, by the way. The white flag is, as you were saying that, I was reminded I was doing day one. I was doing it this morning, and I just really encourage everybody to go check it out, because your day one, which talked about conflict and safety, and you just were sharing about that. So I was walking myself through that situation, and you said an energy position, or you said an energetic position, and
yes.
What was the conflict? So I can now recognize, and I will share with everybody because they might connect. I think, and now I can say I took an energy position that I am not safe to be here past a certain time, because I won't be somewhere else for another person who needs me. And so there's that thing. I am not that I'm not worthy or lovable. I am not reliable, or yes. So that I can see where, and so it doesn't matter if I had the perfect body and the perfect bank account and the perfect thing, because guess what? If I didn't feel I was reliable, that didn't solve all that. You know what I mean? Money can't solve that. Perfect body can't solve that. So you're right. I can see how, gosh, this tapping is going to change my life. Okay. Okay. And that was only day one, folks.
Yeah. It's just so gentle and so, because you're dropping the conflict, and you'll feel it. Your body will begin to relax immediately, right? Because it doesn't have to defend itself against you anymore.
Yes.
This is why self-help doesn't work. And in fact, in many instances, it's actually destructive. Because we go in with this arrogant idea that I know how it's supposed to be, I know what my body is supposed to be doing, I know what I'm supposed to be feeling, and God damn it, I'm going to feel it. So I'm going to visualize, I'm going to visualize this till the veins pop out of my neck. And people even practice tapping for the same reason. Okay, I'm going to just keep tapping till I have dents in my face, and this is going to go away.
Yes.
Right? It's the go away. No, you can't get rid of anything.
Yeah.
You want to feel life. You want to feel. You want to get rid of the negative emotions, you have to get rid of the positive ones. You don't want to feel pain, you cannot feel pleasure. You must be in life, as life is. Not the way you think it should be, but as it is. And then you discover the real bliss of life is harmony with what is, and nothing bothers you.
That was so viable, GP. You just said if you want to get rid of the negative feelings, you have to get rid of the positive ones. That is going to go, that was controversial so much because so many people say, oh, negative thought, let's flip it to a positive, or negative thought, I'm a bad person, or negative thought, I'm not enlightened yet. I haven't had an awakening yet. I'm not there. And that's so not true.
And then the negative thought comes back. Girl, what are you doing back here? Right? And it's an endless battle. It's endless because you're creating it.
So dropping the conflict is no. I just got to back up here. Dropping the conflict is not the awakening. Dropping the conflict can clear the way so that you can experience your awakening.
Well, yeah, and of course there'd be no motivation to drop the conflict unless there was some degree of awakening that made you realize, I've been creating the conflict. So awakening starts the process, awakening sustains the process, and awakening ends the process.
Okay,
awakening
I love
is the
this.
only thing that's ever been happening in your life. It is actually going on right now.
Right. We don't have to do anything to have or create or step into an awakening. So wait a second. Hold on here. This is a grand finale. My gosh. So when we say that the world is having more awakenings or it's on its way to it, I mean, yes, we could be but we're not controlling that. It's just as we come closer to who we are, knowing who we are, we're acknowledging, we're witnessing all the awakenings that have already happened.
We are witnessing it. The veil has been pulled back and we are seeing what's actually happening, what's always been happening, and what in our day and age is simply just accelerated.
Okay. So yes, the veil has been lifted so that we can see which has happened and which is and which. Yeah. Okay.
As Christ put it in the Gospel of Thomas, he said, "The kingdom of God is spread upon the earth, but the people do not see it."
That was the perfect quote. I know it's not called a quote, but the perfect thing to have said there. So right now people are, they've listened to this, they heard this, and I really do have to ask that, like now what? Like they now know they don't have to prepare for it really. Well, sorry, they don't have to do any processes or techniques, and now they're not going to go to self-help or do anything because that's not like it. So yeah, kind of now what?
Yeah, what do I do with all that time and money and but you can see that even the endless seminars and books and stuff have been a distraction from feeling.
Yes.
This is where the rubber meets the road, and it can be scary, right? This is typified in the temptations of Christ and the temptations of the Buddha. As he was in the meditation, as he was piercing this veil, Mara came. Mara, kind of the Hindu equivalent of the devil, and his three daughters of desire and, all the trappings of the world, which Christ was offered as well. And when that didn't work, fear came. And what was it? To keep him from going in. To keep him from going through all the things the mind comes up with. To say, oh, it's dangerous, you shouldn't go in there, terrible room, don't do it, you'll regret it, right? These are typified as the temptations. I mean, that voice is what is mythologized as the devil, the obstructor, the trickster, right? To try to get you from focusing in the one place that you need to focus.
Yes. The trickster. What a great word. That's a perfect word, trickster. There's so many tricks and illusions out there. And do we on purpose do these tricks and illusions to others because we think we're going to gain some kind of power from them? Or
of course we do. We do it on ourselves. We do
Right.
it to others. We do it because we're constantly in the game of trying to sustain this false image, and anything that challenges it becomes a problem. So, you'll find everybody's probably find they've made some kind of transition in their life, right? Because which has been precipitated, whether you know it or not, by an awakening. But it kind of drove you to make a substantive change in your life. You probably find that your friends and your family were not supportive of it. They wanted to keep you the way you were. Why? Because it's an indictment of their own darkness, their own ignorance, their own unwillingness to do this. And so they want to keep you, right? So it's a universal thing. We're doing it to each other. That's what a government is. A government is the culture trying to keep you asleep.
Well, for anybody who'd like to wake up or to know that they've woken up and all the stuff, now I'm getting my words mixed up, but I would love for them to just come on over to the site. It's live now. It's gpwalsh.com. Honestly, you can find everything about GP Walsh there, when the shows are on, what's happening. Get on the list. You can join the tapping groups. They're free right now. We're heading into day 3 tomorrow. Day 3 of 10 days of tapping. So join us there. And thank you so much, GP. Thank you for all of this beautifulness.
Thank you, Lisa. What a pleasure.
Aw, we'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.